Good morning, everyone. I put everyone on mute so you'll be in a listen-only mode. So before we start, I see a lot of people who have joined us from all over the world. And very quickly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Dipesh Deshmukh. So I'm a member of IBG. IBG, India Business Group, a very quick introduction. It's a chamber of commerce. We call it the New Age Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Vikash Mittarsen is the founder, president of IBG, and he is an absolutely passionate networker. So IBG gives a platform to all our members and we help them get business, get contacts, connects, and stuff like that. So it's a fabulous place to connect with people from all over the world. So welcome everyone to the IBG webinar. IBG stands on some very fabulous pillars. So we have Girish and Siddhi. They help us tirelessly. They help all the members with whatever they need, connects, a lot of things. So thank you so much, Girish and Siddhi. Our CEO is Ms. Priya Pansare. Hi, Priya. She has done a lot of new things, a lot of additions since she has taken on board as a CEO. And of course, our founder president, Mr. Vikash. Vikash will speak at the end. So very quick rules for this meeting. I will request everyone to stay on mute. I will request everyone to turn off your video because we only want the speaker to be seen. So if you can turn off your video, that will be really nice. And that way you'll be able to listen and everyone will be able to focus. Thank you guys for turning off your video. And also, lastly, whatever questions you have for Richard, you can type them in the chat box. And at the end, we will do a Q&A session with Richard and I will ask those questions to him. If time does not permit to take all the questions, we will send those questions to Richard and we will have them answered from Richard on your behalf. All right, guys. So I would love to introduce our amazing speaker today, Mr. Richard Rothman. He's from Boston. And so that's one thing connected me and Richard immediately because I have studied in Boston. I was there for almost 7-8 years. And so Richard, Boston is home for me as well. Richard is the managing director of Open Mind Opportunities Consultancy Private Limited. He's based in Mumbai now. Richard is the first and only opportunity consultant in the world. He has over 32 years of experience helping companies to expand opportunities for profitable growth. Some of his clients are Indian corporates, which are giants, like Z Entertainment, Onida, Aptech, Metro Shoes, SL, Propac, K. Raheja Group, and stuff like that. Richard served as a trade commissioner at the United States of America for 23 years. And he also served in Mumbai as trade commissioner in the American Consulate, Mumbai. So that's really an awesome thing. So Richard holds a BA from Bates College, an MBA from California State University, and an MA from Thunderbird School of Global Management. Richard also is an author. He has authored 2 books, Master Opportunity and Make It Big. And his recent book was The Power of Opportunity. So we are absolutely blessed and fortunate to have somebody like Richard to address us. So Richard, you can turn on your presentation now, and then you can start your presentation.
Unmute me?
I have unmuted you.
Okay, fine. Fine. So I need to go to...
Share screen, yeah.
Yeah, I've hit share screen, but I need to find my presentation. Okay. Just a sec.
Yeah.
Okay, there it is. And okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate everyone being on the webinar today. The topic is transforming the COVID crisis into opportunity. And I'd like to discuss 4 key lessons from this. I'm sure all of you are aware that the Chinese symbol for crisis, or the Chinese definition of crisis, is a combination of two characters, one for danger and one for opportunity. So the question is, what will the crisis be for you? It can be either one or it can be both, obviously. But we'd like to see some opportunity come out of it. A fortunate few have really gotten lucky. I mean, the most obvious company is Zoom, the one we're using right now for this webinar. They've seen their usage go up from 10 million to 300 million overnight. And it's just sheer luck. The other kind of people I see who are really lucky are my local bunya, who suddenly has a giant line waiting to buy vegetables, whereas in the past he had to deliver them. But for most of us, I don't think we're lucky. And we have a choice. We can either be a victim or a victor. We can allow the danger side of the equation to overwhelm us and destroy value for us, or we can seize opportunities and create value. And it's not something we can wait around to happen. We actually have to do it ourselves. We have to think about this. We have to work on it. It has to be very conscious. So let's move to lesson one. The most positive side is opportunities. And I've spent a lot of time, obviously, thinking and writing about what opportunities are. So in a nutshell, I'd like to explain it very quickly and very simply. Opportunities are created by change in the environment. If our environment is completely static, then there is no opportunity. Nothing changes, there's no opportunity. In the modern world, we're fortunate to live in a time when there's massive amounts of change very quickly, and that creates a lot of opportunity for us. I'd like to show how that works by focusing on a product that we all have. We all have a mobile handset. And years ago, I'm sure almost everyone who's watching had a, oops, I went back. Almost everyone watching had a phone like this Nokia phone, this feature phone. And then one fine day, we all had a phone like this, a BlackBerry, and then eventually we all switched to the smartphone. Now, there was a key driver of change in the environment that drove the evolution of the handset from the feature phone to the BlackBerry to the smartphone. And this key driver of change did not come from inside the mobile phone industry. It came from outside. It actually came from the telecom industry. Now, when I've asked people, groups of people, what this key driver of change was, 99% cannot guess it. But it is really the force that drove the evolution, and that force was bandwidth. With a 1G phone, like a Nokia, you could only do phone calls and SMSs. With a 2G phone, you could add email, and with a 3G phone, you could put a network computer on the phone and expand utility about 1,000 times. Nokia didn't make use of this key driver of change, and it died, and BlackBerry didn't make use of it, and it died, didn't adapt. So often, very often, companies don't adapt and don't identify what is really driving change, and as a result, they get wiped out. It's very common. A good example of a company that did adapt to change, and this particular change in bandwidth, was Netflix. Netflix started out as a very much more of an offline company, which delivered DVDs by mail. But when 3G became available, they extremely quickly and abruptly switched to an online streaming model. They were the first ones to do it, and as a result, they benefited. If they hadn't done it, obviously, they would have been wiped out. So how about this crisis? What is the key driver of change? Well, it's pretty obvious. The key driver of change for absolutely everyone in the world, it's unprecedented. There's never been a situation in which absolutely everyone, every person in every business in the world is being influenced by the same key driver of change. And in this case, it's the virus, nothing else. So if we're going to take advantage of this change, we have to see, evaluate, and choose opportunities. But we must first understand the dangerous environment created by the virus. We have to understand it based on facts, and we shouldn't be simply understanding it based on what the latest WhatsApp message we receive is telling us. There's a lot of fake news running around. So let's in lesson 2, focus on understanding the virus. Okay, I'm fortunate because my mother is a senior scientist. She was heading research management at probably the world's best infectious disease research institute for decades. That's Walter Reed, run by the US Army. And she's an expert on viruses. So for the past few months, she's been educating me. So I've been fortunate about the real key facts about this virus. So fact 1, COVID-19 is currently unstoppable. Why? Well, because it's a new virus. That's why it's called a novel coronavirus. And because it's new, absolutely nobody in the world has natural immunity to it. And that's why we're all hiding, because we have no immunity. Fact 2, because COVID is a virus, there is no cure. Viruses have never been cured. Think about the common cold. There is no cure for the common cold. There's no cure for other viruses, such as AIDS, such as measles, smallpox, and so on. And drugs like remdesivir, which has been so hyped, don't cure the virus, and they actually have extremely limited utility against the virus. Fact 3, the only way to wipe out viruses is through vaccination. That's how smallpox has been wiped out. That's how measles has been limited, and polio. So the thing is that no vaccine has ever been created in less than 4 years. And the average time to create a vaccine is 10 years. So creating a vaccine within 2 years is a wildly best case scenario. When Trump says he's going to have 300 million doses by December, he's just being Trump. This is a very, very unlikely scenario. We saw the news, the US market jumping up yesterday because of a first stage test from Moderna's RNA vaccine. But frankly, RNA vaccines have never been developed for humans, ever. It's a completely speculative technology, and it has to go through many other phases, and most tests fail for vaccines. So frankly, the market is banking more on hope than facts, and the probabilities are very low. Fact 4, the only other solution to the pandemic is herd immunity. That's where everyone gets the virus, you develop immunity, and then it doesn't hurt you anymore. But this requires that 55 to 90% of the population gets infected. So we've all heard about efforts to flattening the curve. Supposedly we're under lockdown because we want to flatten the curve. But actually flattening the curve is not being done in order to make this whole process go faster. Flattening the curve is making the process go much longer. If we didn't take any protective measures, this whole crisis could be over in a few months. Everyone would get the virus, millions of people would die because the healthcare system capacity wouldn't be able to deal with all those sick people. So we're in lockdown to give time for the healthcare system to build up ICU capacity and so on. But with protective measures, it means the crisis is greatly prolonged. How long? Now, how long can we realistically expect this to go on? There was a recent study publicized in the New York Times, which showed, and done by the University of Minnesota, which estimated that to reach a 55% bare minimum threshold for herd immunity in the US would take until July 2022. And the virus will most likely come in a series of waves in which we lock down for a while, then we open up, then it starts again, we lock down, open up, and so on. It could be many waves, it could be a few waves. The best comparative data would come from the Spanish flu pandemic of 100 years ago. It lasted 2 years. The second wave, we can see here, was 5 times worse than the first wave. And the third wave was 2.5 times worse than the first wave. So there's every reason to believe that future waves could be worse. And in the Spanish flu, it's estimated 12 million Indians died. And that's with a population that was at least 4 or 5 times smaller than it is now. So how's India doing? Well, unfortunately, India's curve is not flattening. Let's compare, this data is taken from the Johns Hopkins COVID Resource Center website, which I encourage all of you to to use. It's quite good, it has great data. We can see that Italy on the left side, which had a big outbreak where it was up to 7,000 cases a day, has now fallen with a severe lockdown to about 1,000 new cases a day. So they've not only managed to flatten the curve, they've bent the curve. The US, on the other hand, has flattened the curve, but they haven't bent it much, and they're still doing 20 to 25,000 new cases a day. India, on the other hand, you can see how the curve is still rising. In fact, if you go back to March 23rd, there were about 100 new cases a day. As of today, there's about 4,500 to 5,000 new cases a day. So daily cases in India are up 45 to 50 times in 8 weeks of lockdown, which is not positive. If you open up, you can imagine it could get a lot worse. And India just passed 100,000 cases. The real question is, can India flatten the curve without flattening its economy? And it's a good question because red zones, where we have the worst outbreaks, are at least 41% of India's economy. And in fact, all of India's main urban growth centers are in red zones. And as we all know, India's urban areas are definitely not designed for social distancing. I don't know how you can open up Bombay's economy without opening up the trains. And if you open up the trains, you got the full dense crush load, and again, it's impossible. So I don't envy the Indian government's task here. I think it's a real quandary. Even if you open up, though, it doesn't really mean you're open. Let's take the example of China, which has done the best job of quashing the virus. They've opened up, supposedly, but still, if you can see these statistics from The Economist, hotel occupancy is still at 50%, consumer footfalls in malls 50%, flights, passengers 25% of normal, discretionary spending is down by 40%. People are still not venturing out. I heard the news that Shanghai Disneyland was sold out when it opened, but it's only running at 20% capacity. So if you have to ask the question of how many companies can survive at 50% capacity, or in fact, how many companies can even survive at 85% capacity? Most companies have margins below 10%. How many companies can survive repeated lockdowns? Not too many. So if we're going to look at the danger of the virus and understand it in a realistic way and not use hope as a strategy, we have to assume as a base case that this crisis will continue for about 2 years, because there's no way that we're going to reach, I wouldn't say no way, but it's highly unlikely that there'll be a vaccine produced that works on everyone and that can be produced in quantity within 2 years, even with the monumental effort that's going on. So 2 years of crisis will likely result in continued massive demand destruction, massive supply disruptions, massively reduced consumer and B2B spending, massive sustained unemployment, and massively reduced capex, and a massive number of bankruptcies. I'm sorry for using the word massive, but we don't know how big it's going to be or how big it will remain, but it will be unprecedented and at depression level size. What we're facing really is a global balance sheet crisis. And we can easily assume that the Indian government's 10% GDP stimulus, which isn't really 10% of GDP and isn't really a full stimulus, is going to be inadequate to prevent widespread insolvencies. Even if governments pump in liquidity, this does not necessarily stop companies from becoming insolvent. We can see a giant balance sheet crisis. So let's go to lesson 3, and we want to focus on opportunities now. And the first type of opportunities are opportunities to survive. One of my favorite genius investors is a guy named Howard Marks. He's written a couple of great books, and he writes notes that he puts on his website. And he's just a really smart guy and a very common sense guy. And in his recent note that he wrote a couple days ago called Uncertainty, he said, if you've never experienced something before, you can't say you know how it's going to turn out. The really germane thing about this crisis is that none of us have experienced anything like this before. We haven't lived through a pandemic, and even though we've lived through recessions, we have never lived through a coordinated global economic meltdown. So what we all face is an extreme learning curve. In other words, there's no existing algorithm in our minds or in our businesses for dealing with this situation. What's unprecedented about it, and why is it so unpredictable? Well, we have four simultaneous developments that have never happened before at the same time. And some of them have never happened before in our lifetime. One, we have a global pandemic. Two, we have a massive global economic contraction in which it's happening everywhere. Three, we have an oil price collapse. And four, we have a massive debt monetization by governments on a scale we've never seen before, as well as massive fiscal expansion. All four of these are going on at the same time. So basically what we have is massive unpredictability. Everyone who's intelligent is taking the attitude of uncertainty. This week, the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, described the outlook as highly uncertain and subject to significant downside risks. And he cautioned that economic recovery may not take place till the end of 2021, especially if a vaccine isn't ready. I like to listen to Warren Buffett, and I watched his recent annual meeting of Berkshire Hathaway. Let's face it, he's the greatest investor of the last 100 years. And in past crises like 2008, he was immediately investing. He was pouring money in. It was a great buying opportunity. But here we see a completely different attitude by Buffett. He's focused on survival, he's said. Why? Because it's an unparalleled situation. There are far too many uncertainties to bet against the future at this point. And he's taking a worst case scenario in mind. So Buffett is sitting on $137 billion in cash. And rather than buying, he's selling. He sold his airline stocks, and we see that last week he sold much of his stocks in JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. So he's piling up more cash. Another guy who I respect is Uday Kotak, and he's a great survivor. He's thrived largely because he survived to a great extent. I interviewed him for my book, Master Opportunity and Make It Big, and he pointed out that in 1997, there were 4,000 NBFCs in India, but only 20 of them, including his, survived the crisis. And to survive, he cut his balance sheet by 50%, and he pointed out that sustainability is a very important part of the journey for any business. If you can't sustain in the tough times, you won't benefit from the good times. Good advice. Another example of survival, hard to believe now, but true, is Apple. In 1996, Steve Jobs was brought in to save Apple. It was weeks away from bankruptcy at that point. The first thing he did was cut the product line from 355 computers to 10. And the second move was to go out and hat in hand and raise $150 million from Bill Gates. And that saved the company. And when people said, why are you doing this? He says, I need to conserve resources to fund new opportunities. And he was very successful at that. So your first priority in this crisis is to focus on what I call internal opportunities. Those involve your corporate mission and your business model. You want to be able to tweak those to survive for, let's say, a 2-year period. You need to avoid relying on hope as your strategy. If you're in the stock market, sure, and you're a trader, you can have hope as other people's hope can be your strategy for temporary short-term trades. But if you have a business, you have to prepare for worst case scenarios. You need to cut costs and innovate efficiencies. The key is to avoid insolvency by preserving and raising cash. Now's the time to cooperate with competitors to lobby for industry relief. The good times will come after the virus, but only survivors will benefit. So it's really important to focus on survival and not rely on hope. On a more positive note, we move to lesson 4, because there are opportunities to thrive even during a crisis and preparing for opportunities to thrive after a crisis. It's interesting, a few years ago when I was on the training team at Harvard Business School, I was invited to a lecture by Professor J. Bruce Harrell of Harvard Business School, who had done a study of companies throughout the world, all sectors, all sizes. And he had found that only 1.7% of companies last more than 40 years. And that's remarkable because that's only half a human lifespan. Now, companies should be able to last forever. There's no reason they should have a lifespan. Now, companies die because the opportunities they pursue have a life cycle. Every opportunity has a life cycle. It might be really long, like Coca-Cola, or it could be months, like some technology products. The thing is that change happens and makes opportunities irrelevant. Now, in reaction to change, many companies either choose to stand still. A good example of that was Kodak. A lot of companies choose to stand still and die, or a lot of companies pursue new opportunities that don't really adapt to change. You saw Nokia and BlackBerry, for example, trying to adapt to change and pursuing opportunities that didn't really work, and they died. The successful companies choose new opportunities that do adapt best to the key drivers of change. I see companies out there trying to adapt now. For example, Scootsie, we all know, is a food delivery app. It's not doing very well because a lot of restaurants are not operating, and those were their customers. So a couple of weeks ago, Scootsie called me and said, now we're not just one-way delivery, we're any which way, and if you want to deliver anything to anyone, we can do it. But they haven't really followed up. Their app doesn't have that service, and I haven't heard another word from them. On the other hand, a company which I had never heard of called WeFast, which does two-way delivery, is really catching on. And I've gotten a bunch of deliveries through WeFast, and I've used them myself. And I had never heard of these guys. So why is two-way delivery suddenly an opportunity? Because we're all stuck at home. And we don't have drivers to deliver things anymore, some of us, or they can't move on the road. So it's a great opportunity, and it's a great adaptation. The most important part about adaptation is not just your business model, it's your mental model. You know, when you're in times of unprecedented change as we are today, you have to be open-minded and irreverent. Irreverent means you have to question all the old assumptions that you had that worked in the past about who, what, where, when, and how. And you have to have a learning orientation. You really have to strive to understand the consequences of change, how this virus is driving change for all your stakeholders, but especially for your current and potential customers. Why are your customers the most important? Well, obviously because they pay you. These are the guys you really need to keep their loyalty or look for new ones. The key here, I mean, it's easy during a tough time to focus on ourselves and feel sorry for ourselves and be completely self-immersed. But the real key to success here is to focus on service to others. You're not the only one facing problems adapting. Your customers are struggling as well. And you can adapt best by helping others to adapt to this new reality. First, you definitely shouldn't assume that your customers have the same needs as before. So you have to really question, how can you help your customers to adapt, and what new customers can you help? And you really have to assume that you don't know the answers anymore based on your old algorithms and old assumptions. You know, for example, a few days ago, I had a call with a company that makes cartons. They make, and pre-COVID, you know, most of their sales were going to large furniture manufacturers. So they're making big cartons. And furniture isn't going to be the greatest business in the next couple of years. Obviously, people aren't going to be forming as many households. Companies aren't going to be buying as much furniture. So how can this company adapt to the new reality? I mean, the obvious things to think of is it could go into supplying cartons for e-commerce. It could sell through new channels to reach these kind of companies. But really, is that the answer? I don't know. You know, how can it learn what to do, and how can it efficiently focus its scarce resources? Should it just jump to conclusions and say maybe we should go into smaller cartons for e-commerce? It's a good question, but how do they know? Because they don't want to waste their resources going down blind alleys or going the wrong way. The fact is that it's really not that difficult to find out what your options are and what the best options are. Really, all you need to do is ask questions. All of us in business have customers that we should be talking to. If you're in B2B, you should really focus not only on your own customers, but your customers' customers, because that's who they sell to. There are potential customers out there you can talk to. You should be talking to your channels, your suppliers, your employees. I mean, there are lots of people you can talk to find out how, you know, get their ideas and find out how are you affected, how are you adjusting, how are others adjusting, how are people successfully adjusting, what are they doing, what are our competitors doing, what do you need, what's missing, how could we help? Okay, so to learn, all you need to do is ask questions, and most of us have these kind of connects that of people we can talk to learn. This is what I do in my own process. I have a 6-step process for uncovering, recovering, and discovering opportunities for sustained profitable growth. And in the first step, we just do something called an opportunity audit, which is very similar to that, which everyone really can do on their own. It pays to have a systematic approach to this, and generally what I do first is create an opportunity inventory, and that's looking at opportunities. I mean, if you're going to choose from a data set or a set of alternatives, it helps to have the biggest inventory of opportunities to choose from. And there are 2 basic types of opportunities we're looking at here. First, there are the internal opportunities. Those are ones focused on your mission and your model. And your internal opportunities are focused mostly on survival, such as cost cutting and efficiencies, balance sheet survival and revival strategies, and business model revamping to deal with the new reality. And second, external opportunities, which focus mostly on your market, which can help you thrive. Focus on existing and new segments, new products and services, new and existing, your customers, your channels, and your suppliers. So you make an inventory of your opportunities, and then definitely I have a process for filtering opportunities, which starts with, of course, understanding the key drivers of change, which we talked about a lot, which is the virus, creating an inventory, and then I use a set of evaluation filters for each opportunity and alignment filters, because in order to implement opportunities, your business model has to be aligned around your market, your domain, and your mission. And of course, there's no time in a brief presentation to talk more about this, but examples of people who have coped with difficult situations are in my book, Master Opportunity and Make It Big, and my newer book, The Power of Opportunity, explains this process in detail. And these books are available on Amazon. Of course, it's only an ebook right now because Amazon, nobody's selling physical books. And that's the end of the road for this presentation. Now I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. It was really amazing. You gave so many insights. Your examples were really good. So guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box.
Let's please not be shy about asking questions.
Yeah.
Happy to take any kind of questions about anything.
Yeah. Richard, you can stop sharing your screen.
Okay, so I need to, yeah, I shut down the share screen.
No, but we can still see your desktop, so.
Oh, how do I, okay, so I need to go here. I don't know how to stop sharing the screen. Should I do this? Wait a minute, I can maximize. How about if I maximize?
It's okay, I just shut it.
Okay,
I can play God, right?
Yeah, it's nice, no? Zoom God.
Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Richard. Do you see the mainline categories as apparel, shoes, etc., shaping in the next 1 year?
I think apparel and shoes are going to be under a lot of strain. I saw some recent data from the US in which I don't have the exact numbers, but I did see some data from the US showing that apparel sales were down some incredible number, like 80% in April. And it's a natural thing if you think about it, because people are scared of touching things that you may have touched. And certainly online retail, whether it's online or offline, if you're getting a garment or a pair of shoes for that matter, you don't know who touched it before you. You don't know if it's covered with virus.
Right.
So that's one factor that's driving lower demand. And that factor isn't going to go away for a long time. The second factor is simply that people aren't going to be going to shops as much.
Right.
Because they're scared of mingling with other people. And third is, since we're all sitting at home, and a lot of people are going to continue working from home, I know I have a nice work shirt on, but I'm sitting in my shorts. So I don't think I need to run out and buy a lot of new wardrobe. And I'm certainly not going to, be going to any weddings this year, probably. So I think a lot of demand for apparel and shoes is going to continue to be slow. I think it's going to be under a lot of strain for a prolonged period.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we have a question which can be taken up as a separate presentation, but so what is your view on the Indian stock market?
My view long-term on the Indian stock market continues to be extremely bullish. I think when you're looking at stock markets, you have to understand that stock markets do run on hope in the short term.
Right.
So hope as a strategy, if you're a day trader or if you're a short-term trader, is actually quite good because in a crisis, because volatility is very high. So if you're trading, you can benefit from volatility. You saw yesterday the US market went up 3% plus on the hope that the Moderna vaccine is suddenly going to be the answer, even though the probability based on a single trial, first stage trial, is extremely low. But that's how markets behave.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with our own business, we don't have that sort of liquidity where we can jump in and out on a daily, hourly, or minute-by-minute basis and invest. So I think markets are a place where you can play the volatility game created by the virus.
Mm-hmm.
You're into that. I think after the virus is over, I think this crisis is a great opportunity to buy stocks at a low price in good companies.
Right.
And I think crises like this and recessions are great buying opportunities.
Right.
But I do think that we have to, again, look at history. Typically in stock market, in recessions, stocks go down in waves as well. And typically there's not just one wave down. There are multiple waves down. So we have to be careful. But I think great buying opportunity as long, just don't buy companies that are going to go bankrupt. Because if you go bankrupt, obviously you lose it all.
Yeah. All right. So Richard, I think have like 10, 15 questions.
Yeah, go ahead. I have plenty of time.
Yes. So I would like to ask Richard about opportunities in the CSR sector. After COVID, all causes seem to be at a dead end.
I think, obviously, if you're in the CSR sector, you have to adapt to the new reality in that people are going to be focusing their resources on this crisis. So I think you have to be creative. And if you were doing something, if you were in CSR doing a particular activity that is no longer relevant, right, you have to change what you're doing. But on the other hand, there's unprecedented suffering in the overall environment. We have unemployment rates of 25% plus In India, we don't see the government handing out really enough resources to people. We see a lot of people suffering. So I think there's enormous scopes for CSR activities. And I'm sure some companies might not have the kind of money to fund it anymore. But I think NGOs have to be a little more creative about where they raise their money.
Right.
But I mean, obviously the scope for doing good works is immense.
So we have a question. Can you specifically mention one or two new opportunities you found which we can pursue? Two, I can say, make masks, sanitizers. Other than that,
okay. So we've all seen the obvious opportunities that have come up because people are socially distancing. I think let's assume, rather than saying one or two opportunities, first of all, opportunities have to be implemented. So I can't say that an opportunity is right for anyone unless I understand what their capabilities are, obviously. I mean, opportunities that you pursue have to be based on your capabilities to implement them, your business model, your capability to create a business model, and so on. But I mean, the best way of looking at this is looking at the trends in the overall environment. And obviously, for the foreseeable future, a lot of people are going to be stuck at home or stuck and not cooperating, not meeting each other in the same way. So for example, how are people going to have weddings now? Are people going to stop getting married? Obviously not. People are going to continue getting married, but they're not going to have weddings in the same way. They're not going to have weddings with 1,000 people crammed together with each other. They're going to have to do it in a different way. There are opportunities in helping that segment adapt. And if you look at any other segments that are particularly impacted by this virus and by the situation, if you can help craft solutions to deal with this new reality, those can be opportunities. And frankly, since social distancing is such a pervasive behavior and is impacting so many sectors of business, not just the obvious ones, there's scope for opportunities to help all those kinds of sectors adapt. You just have to look at it and look at ones that you can actually help with, okay? Don't delve too much into areas you know nothing about. Yeah, focus on your strengths and your ability to give useful service.
Thank you. One more question. Apparel's buying will not be an opportunity. Is that a question or a statement?
Well, you know, you can turn apparel buying into an opportunity by making it safer for people.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm not saying you should be a con artist and sell COVID-resistant garments, but certainly there's an opportunity in doing designer face masks. And I'm surprised I'm not seeing a lot of face masks out there with advertisements on them, okay? You should be having your IBG face masks out there giving them away. I mean, I think focus on what the problems are and what the issues are. That's where the opportunities come where there's friction, where people are facing friction.
Yeah.
Okay? People are scared to wear clothes or buy clothes because other people might have touched them, or they don't want to go to a mall. I mean, how can you overcome those problems? How can you reduce the friction involved in buying clothes?
Yeah.
Focus on that, and there are opportunities.
Brilliant. What do you think about packaged food industry in India?
Well, obviously, people will keep eating packaged food. In fact, I think the statistics show that people are sitting at home eating a lot of junk food. So packaged food is typically junk food. So I think it's got a good scope. I think the problem that packaged food companies are facing is two. One is getting supply, because a lot of the supply is coming from small vendors. You know, most companies in India don't make everything themselves. They farm it out to contract manufacturers. And a lot of them are having trouble getting employees to show up, and a lot of them are even having trouble transporting their employees to work. So that's a problem. Secondly, they're having problem transporting the goods to market.
Yeah.
Distributors and vendors are also having trouble paying them. So I think packaged food should do well if they can overcome these issues of logistics, especially manpower and so on, which they will over time. I think there are opportunities for companies to help those companies to overcome those problems.
Cool. Do you see room air conditioning use going down?
No, I don't. I see it massively going up.
Yeah, I'm using
Obviously,
my air conditioner 24 hours.
Yeah, I think if I know I'm running my ACs more, and I think the market for AC should also increase. The problem is, of course, that given the lockdown, you can't get anyone to sell you an AC, install an AC, or fix an AC.
Yeah.
So until that supply chain is opened up, particularly the service part of it, the AC business is going to suffer from a lack of demand. Even though there's great demand, it's going to focus on a lack of supply.
Hmm.
So I think the government needs to start opening these things up. I know I had a broken AC in this room that I'm sitting in, and I hired a guy who showed up in a plastic suit. Not only was he wearing a mask, he had an entire plastic suit on. So we felt happy about it. I don't know if it made any difference, but he fixed the AC and we let him in the building.
Wow.
So the AC guys need to adapt too. And I'm sure the guys selling the plastic suits are doing well.
Oh, yes. Okay, so hi Richard, my name is Question Man Hemal Manik. What
Yes.
question entrepreneurs need to ask themselves to challenge their conditioned mindsets and
Yes.
open to the new world of possibilities?
What is the question they need to ask them?
Yes. So he's saying what question do entrepreneurs need to ask themselves to challenge their conditioned mindset?
I think you can ask yourselves what's working for me now and what isn't working for me now.
Correct.
Okay? If something is working for you, good. If it's working, then ask, is it working for my customers? Is it not working for my customers? What isn't working and what isn't working? What's working, good. Focus on doing more of that. If the stuff isn't working, that's where you have opportunities to fix things.
Yeah.
Okay? If it isn't working for your customers, that's where you have opportunities to fix things for them. So it's not, so asking yourself these questions is great, but this whole conversation shouldn't just be looking in a mirror and asking yourself questions, because we all suffer from confirmation bias.
Yeah.
We all want to look for the answers that suit our predispositions, and we all have opinions and beliefs. Let's open our minds by talking to other people.
Yeah.
Let's talk to our customers. Let's talk to our customers' customers if we can. I find that very useful, especially in B2B businesses. Let's talk to as many people as we can. Let's even talk to our competitors. They're all suffering. We know our competitors.
Yeah.
Let's find out what is working out there. What isn't working? What are people doing to adapt? What are the problems that we can overcome? Let's get some more opinions. Okay, this is not the time to sit and look in a mirror. Yeah, get out there and ask questions and learn. This is a time to learn. We're in an unprecedented situation. We have to figure it out.
Absolutely.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Well said. Richard, what's your take on the earlier sunshine sectors like clean energy, solar, EV? Do you foresee that people and government will slow their investments in these areas?
Well, oil is going to be cheap for a while. There's no doubt about that. That's good for India for sure. It's probably not good for some companies in India. It's bound to slow down investment in clean energy. I mean, when the world is going through an unprecedented crisis and borrowing trillions of dollars, it's unlikely that money is going to be so freely available for clean energy when dirty energy has suddenly become much cheaper. Also, the slower economy has obviously slowed down the pace a bit of global warming, so made it less of a crisis issue. So I think clean energy has a good long-term future, no doubt about that. but I'm not sure it's going to be a focus area during the crisis.
All right. Fundamental assumption in your presentation is 2 years to develop vaccine. While vaccine may take time, what about medicine? Richard said virus has no cure. You mean there can be no medicine to prevent at least death?
Okay, first of all, that two years is a best case scenario. It is possible that if an RNA vaccine, like the one Moderna is trying to develop, is successful, that a vaccine could be available quicker, let's say in a year or even less.
Yeah.
However, just to reiterate, there has never been an RNA vaccine developed for humans ever. So the probabilities are extremely low. Even a 2-year time horizon is a best case scenario. But given that the world's pharma companies are working diligently together, well, separately, but together in some ways on this, 2 years, okay. You know, the US has developed the atom bomb from start to finish in 3 years. They can probably develop a vaccine in 2 years.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that there won't be some drugs that can treat this? The best case for drugs are for drugs that are already existing. You know, drugs have a long development cycle as well. And typically it takes many years to develop a new drug because you want to make sure it's safe and doesn't kill people. So the most likely scenario are for drugs like chloroquine that are already existing, the one that Donald Trump has been boasting about. And in fact, I read today in the news that he's actually taking it himself, which is an indication of his intelligence level. Frankly, or remdesivir. Now, let's take remdesivir. Remdesivir has been shown to reduce the time of treatment for severely ill people in hospital from 14 to 10 days. And that's only in first stage trial. So some of these drugs might reduce the death rate. They might reduce the time in hospital. Or, you know, if the world had a lot of time, maybe there could be a cocktail put together of drugs, as there has been for AIDS. AIDS was never cured. There is no vaccination. But after 10, 15 years of effort, the pharma industry, and we want to thank companies like Cipla in India, this pharma industry put together a cocktail of drugs. Cipla marketed them cheaply, which basically ends the death threat of AIDS. That took a couple decades to do. So yes, there may be some drugs that can really mitigate this virus, but to say it's going to be done quickly, again, the probability is extremely low. So can we bank on that? That's more of banking on hope. We have to be realistic.
Cool. I mean, sometimes just a thought comes to me. Imagine a virus that can be killed by soap or by a sanitizer, and we are not able to figure out a drug that you can take and kill it.
Well, you know, again, but getting back to the genius Donald Trump, he's suggesting that we drink Dettol.
Oh yeah, there is a cure. There are drugs.
Solve the problem because it will kill you. Then you won't get the virus.
Yes. All right. How do you think this work from home experiment is going to work in the long term?
Well, I think we've all seen as we're doing you know, in the old days we would have done a meeting in an auditorium, right? This presentation would have been done in an auditorium. Now we're all used to doing webinars, and we're all used to communicating with friends and family and workmates and everyone by Zoom. I think this is a real game changer, and I think it's going to have a permanent effect on business travel, the hotel industry. I think it's going to have a permanent effect on the number of people working from home. I think it's going to result also in redesign of offices, because the trend toward cramming people together at tables is going to end.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of things that are going to change as a result of this. And this is an example of how major change creates opportunities. okay? The people who were selling tables to startup firms to cram their employees together on, to work on, they're gonna have to either adapt their business model or they're gonna have to die. People aren't gonna be buying those tables anymore. I think a lot of companies that are in this supply chain are gonna have to change their business models and change their products and look for different customers as well and change their offerings. There's no doubt about it, because we have seen, and this is just the beginning. If we're doing this for another couple of years, there's gonna be, the way we do it is going to improve a lot. A lot of people are going to introduce innovations that make this whole experience even better. So we're going to change our ways, and we don't know how exactly, but there's a lot of opportunity for people to come in here and make it easier, more convenient, cheaper, better for people to do all this.
Yeah. I'm going to take one last question now. How can business be converted to opportunity? Any special formula you have? Here we see opportunity, but I want clients to see opportunity in my business.
Well, I think you need to, at a minimum, talk to your, if you have an existing business, I think you need to go out and talk to your customers about what friction they're facing, what problems they're facing, how they're adapting, how other vendors are helping them, what's going on. You need to talk to all your other stakeholders of importance. You need to get your employees and your management to talk to people. You need to talk to them. You need to go out, as I've said, and ask a lot of questions and not jump to conclusions and not think you know the answers to your customers' problems because you watched some presentation by an opportunity consultant, okay? I don't have the answers immediately for anyone in particular. I just have a process for getting answers, all right? When I get any client, I go through this process. I don't jump to conclusions. And I don't think anyone else should, given how unprecedented this situation and how many uncertainties there are. You need to go out and do that research. I think it's not hard to do. It could be very enjoyable. And then start evaluating, make an inventory of your opportunities, of how you can help yourself survive without destroying your current business, obviously.
Yeah.
And how you can help your customers to survive and thrive. The key in opportunity is helping others. People pay you because you're helping them. You go to your doctor because he helps you. You wait in his waiting room for an hour or two because you can't live without him. And that's what how you want your customers to feel about you. And if you really give them useful service that helps get them through this crisis, they're gonna be loyal and devoted to you, even through the good times as well as the bad. That's what you need to do. Anyone who wants more information on this, feel free to send me an email. I
share your email address with everyone. And what we will do is, we have few more questions. We will send the questions to you, and you can write back to us, and we'll share it with.
Well, I can answer more questions now if people would like. I'm available.
We would like to stick to 11 to 12, which we have already passed 12. We need.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. My email address is richard.rothman@oppguru.com. That's OPPguru.com.
Yes, Girish, if you can just Girish, if you can type. No, I'm telling Girish to type the email address of Richard in the chat box. Everyone can take it down.
Yeah, everyone should get my email and my website.
Yes, we will. Girish will do that. All right. So thank you so much, Richard. You were absolutely awesome. Your presentation was good. You took so much time out and answered so many questions. Before we say goodbye, I would like to invite Priya Pansare, our CEO, to speak a few words, and then I'll have Vikash.
Hey, Richard. This was a real learning. I'm sure all our IBGNs over here have thoroughly enjoyed every statement that you've given to us. And as Richard said, every change brings an opportunity. So yeah, let's follow that trend. Our president, Mr. Vikash Mittasen, would also like to say a few words. So yes.
Over to you, Vikash.
Hi all. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Richard, this was fantastic. I don't want to repeat what everyone else is saying. I know Richard and his family, his wife, for several years now, almost from the time he came to Mumbai. Often we walk together in the evening at the Beach Candy Club. I thought the other day too that Richard is as American as they come. His talk, his looks, his thoughts, whatever we speak, I know that I'm talking to an American. So that's great. More joy to you. His wife, Tabu, is an Indian, as Indian as they come. I hope Tabu doesn't mind my saying this, Richard.
Yes.
Now we're talking about getting out of this trouble. We are eventually going to come out, but it is going to be like a cocoon coming into air for the first time, turning into a butterfly. It is a whole new world that we are getting into. So we will have to unlearn everything that we did in all our years of working. Don't jump into doing things immediately after. Take some time to absorb what has changed and where your place is in the new normal. I think things are going to be good once the things settle down. There is a lot of money being thrown by the government all over the place. Try to catch some of that. Consultants are going to be in great demand, especially those who can manage to get some of the dollies being sent out by the government for their clients. Especially the SME sector will need a lot of funds, but they're also getting a lot of funds. So that's where the cookie lies. Thank you very much, Richard, for being with us. This was better than I expected.
Thank you, Vikas. It was well said, and it was a great pleasure to be with you and your group. And I hope we can do it again in future.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was really a pleasure to host you. And goodbye, everyone. I hope you all had a great session.
And this will be on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Okay.
One thing
Share link with everyone, yes.
Dipesh, one thing I forgot to mention, and that is I welcome all Richard's friends who have joined us today. IBG is going international. So we hope that they latch on to us wherever they are. Thank you.
Thank you.